we're working together to accomplish. December is the timeline for the master plan, and spring of next year is when we hope to be able to come to consensus on an OPA for Michigan and Gratiot and have some answers with regard to environmental analysis on Woodward. How does this happen? I was told to talk a little bit about what your input means to this process. And so there's a couple of ways in which we receive information. One, we do have advisory committees for each of the projects. We have a master plan advisory committee, and for each of the corridor projects, because they're a lot more techy, we have a technical advisory committee and we have a policy advisory committee. So you can count how many committees we have. It's amazing. And so each one of those committees is comprised of leadership on that corridor, so throughout all of the municipalities that fall along those corridors and throughout the region for the master plan. So we're looking for, in the policy body, we have, your mayors or your heads of planning and economic development, et cetera. And for your advisory committees, you have people who tend to work in the planning areas a lot and in the technical realm. So your environmental folks, your ADA folks, and things of that nature, people of that nature. So that's how we get input directly with regard to the leaders in the municipalities within the project area. And then we come out to public meetings and we do listening sessions and we collect these comment cards, which I think some of you guys have already filled out today. We take those comment cards. People don't believe me when I tell them this because we collect anywhere from 50 to 60 at a time. But that's what we have these wonderful project teams for. We give them those comment cards. We ask them to drill down into the themes that came out of those comment cards. Because what we find is typically there's about 5 themes that come out of most comment cards. Every once in a while we have an outlier we have to address as well, but typically we look for themes with those comment cards. And we input that into our analysis. We make sure that we don't do anything that doesn't fit within those themes. So like I said before, safety, reliability, frequency, 24-hour service is a biggie. Specialized transportation services, we hear a lot about that, and I'm missing a couple, but I'm getting tired, so I apologize. But that's how we use your input, is to figure out where they fit in those themes and if our planning aligns with those themes correctly. And so we come back to you. It's an iterative process. We continue to come back to you to talk about, this is what we heard from you, this is the result. This is what we heard from you, here's how we've drilled down and eliminated some alternatives based on the input we received in our previous interactions. So that's how we use your public input. And with that, I'm going to close and just open up for Q&A.
All right, so what sort of questions do folks have? That's been a lot of information, I know. Hopefully it fit into some of what you already knew, what you brought in. All right, got a question from the back.
Are you going to do it the Ruth way and you hold the mic, or are you going to do it the Megan way?
I've been reading the paper a lot. I've been hearing that project out here in front of us will be till 17 when it gets started, as opposed to the fall of 16 as it was originally broadcast. I need transit now. Why the hold off?
Why the hold off?
I got to preface this with, I am not an official spokesperson for M1.
All right.
However, this is what I know. I know that there were some issues with regard to procurement of the vehicles, and I believe that's what set the timeline back by just, I believe it's only 3 months. So initially it was the fall, it was the late fall of 2016, and now it's the early 2017 segment that they expect to be operational. And if you look at transit projects kind of across the map, that's still pretty good. Now, if I come back to you again and we move that timeline out further, I'll try to have a better answer for you. But I do know that they are moving at warp speed currently in terms of trying to get this M1 rail up and running.
I can add, Marcia. Oh, sorry. Sure. I was going to say, I can add, Marcia. One of the challenges with having, again, not coming from the RTA, my own personal perspective, one of the challenges of having a private group try to do a major development project like a streetcar, I don't think they really understood quite all of the hoops and hurdles and challenges that they had to go through. So there was a little bit of a delay in that regard, but usually it takes 3 full years from the time you say, it's not like you can go to the streetcar store and pick up some streetcars and have them delivered. All of these are individually made to order, once ordered. They only make, I don't know, a couple dozen a year in the country. So it usually takes them 3 years from the time they order to the when they're delivered. They're doing this super speed. We're all frustrated with how long this is going to take, but I am quite convinced they are going as fast as possible, as feasible to get M1 rail going.
Megan, I'm 63 now. I want my breathing body to be able to get in one of the cars and not my hearse. And not be one of those cars be my hearse to take me to the hereafter.
I hear you. Yeah, we all want this to move fast. Actually, Tiffany, could you say a little bit about how M1 is working with the RTA? Again, I know that they're not officially, yeah, tell us more about that.
Okay, well, the M1 Rail team is also a member of our Providers Advisory Council. So one of the things that I can point to specifically is that as we're working towards the fare car study, we're also looking at what their needs will be so that when we do a unified fare system that we can integrate with the M1 Rail project as well. And other than that, I mean, we're lockstep with them. I think that they have a very vested interest in our success, given that they do not want to be in transit operations business for the long haul and for the duration. They need a governing body that can take over the operations that they implement. And other than that, we just have a lot of support from M1 and we talk to them on a very regular basis.
Great. Other questions? All right. Dave, and then next over here.
You do it, Bruce.
Okay, just a quick follow-up question on M1. I hear, I don't know if it's on good authority, that any discussion of going beyond the boulevard is dead at this point.
That's good.
Is that true, number one? And number two, if you don't go at least 8 Mile or beyond 8 Mile, bring suburbanites in, then a lot of the value, light rail, is really down the drain, isn't it? So is it dead? There's no discussion at this point beyond the boulevard?
There is additional discussion beyond the boulevard, but not with regard to the streetcar specifically. So when I talk a bit about the Woodward project going from the downtown terminus out to Pontiac, what we have in terms of a locally preferred alternative is a bus rapid transit option, which for people who aren't as familiar, is light rail on wheels is the way that it's described if you do a gold standard BRT implementation. And that's what's being studied and considered now beyond the boulevard. And the way that it's designed currently is that it will traverse Pontiac down to West Grand Boulevard, take a jaunt over to either John R. Cass. Directionally, we're still working that out from an engineering perspective. Pick up folks at either the DMC or at Wayne State University and circulate around. Because what we'll have happening on Woodward is we'll have the M1 Rail project. We'll have DDOT services still going every quarter, stopping every quarter mile. Smart services likely also providing fixed route service along Woodward. And we'll also have passenger vehicles and a potential for a median as well. So we're going to be limited on right-of-way space, and when I talked about the corridor being more than just a specific one street, but the entire area that you can capture population and employment density on that as well, we'll be able to capture a lot more population and employment density by taking that route. And when you get to West Grand Boulevard, what's envisioned there is essentially a Union Station, where you'll have an Amtrak service that can get you to Chicago. You'll have an option to get on M1 and continue to traverse along Woodward, or you can stay on the BRT and get yourself all the way to downtown in a one-seat ride.
Better than what we have.
Better than what we have.
I'll use the mic to add my 2 cents. One, the streetcar is designed to be more of a circulator. It's going to be stopping very frequently, every quarter of a mile, so that people don't have to walk very far. You wouldn't want to take a streetcar stopping every quarter mile all the way to Pontiac. It would take you 2 or 3 hours. So the streetcar will be the frequently stopping local, whereas bus rapid transit can be your expressway of transit that could get you all the way downtown to Pontiac, in under an hour, for example.
To the airport.
Yes.
Sorry.
All right, so I've got a question here, and then Marguerite next. Can you introduce yourself too?
How you doing? My name is Terry. I'm here representing the Detroit 15 Fighters Division for the workers, the fast food workers around the city. I had two questions. One question was, do you think they'll possibly look into having 24-hour service? And my other question was, do you think they'll try and look into maybe reimbursing the fast food workers or setting up some type of specialized discounted fee for them to get to work and their set time, so they won't have to worry about that, because it's already hard enough as it is trying to work on a fast food worker's salary and pay bills.
So with regard to 24/7 service, absolutely, that is something that we are looking into as part of the master transit plan. We do The one thing, and I like to temper every statement that I temper everything that gets passed. I've got to stop doing that. Is that we have to look at the cost and feasibility. So every route won't be able to have likely 24/7 service, but we'll look at frequencies, we'll look at demand on those routes, but the higher traveled routes, the ones where you have the traffic that's the most intense and there's the most demand, those are the routes that we have to put our resources into with regard to 24/7 service. With regard to your second question, in terms of partnering with organizations to support employees in terms of vouchers, we absolutely support that and want to do that, and we'll start making those asks of employers now, so that when we can be operational, when we are operational in the future, we can start moving towards doing those programs much more quickly. As it stands today, there are commuter challenge, if Ruth, you want to talk to that. There's a lot of employers that do provide some type of subsidy to their employees to entice them to use the existing system, and you know more about that than I do, so perhaps you two should communicate on that.
Can I just, microphone.
For everybody's sake, let's talk what we currently have and people may not know about. There's the JARC New Freedom. So there are, through DDOT, SMART, and the RIDE, funds available to help workers who can't necessarily get to their jobs using a fixed bus system. So make sure that you find out. I don't know if I have any brochures, but Marty Moore here, one of our true board members, but he's also a transit professional who worked for the Detroit Area Agency on Aging, and prior to that he worked for the Smart Bus service. So I want to make sure people know what we have. You know, it's great to talk about what we want in the future, but make sure we utilize what we have. Secondly, there are some federal programs that allow employers to sign up, and then it's like a flexible spending account. And Marty will let me know if I'm saying something wrong, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so you can use pre-tax dollars, set them aside, and use that for your bus passes or whatever you do. There's some eligibility on the application, and your employer has to sign up. There's also some shared rides. So there's Michigan Ride Share, so that if, and it may not work for fast food workers because of shifts and different scheduling, but for people who work at a specific location, whether it's downtown Detroit or downtown Ann Arbor, where you can have a shared van and one or two people are designated as drivers, and they provide the van and a lot of other things, and they have a guaranteed ride home service. So if your boss says, Ruth, you gotta work late, you don't have to go, oh, shoot, well, I'm gonna get home. They will make sure you can get home. So, in fact, I was talking to someone in our building, and he said he didn't think it was a good idea. Now he thinks it's the greatest thing. Also, the Department of Human Services, the Michigan Department of Human Services has some programs for people who are eligible to get special transportation services. There's some private services. So let's make sure we take advantage of the things we have now, but also we need more options, no doubt.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, I think we have another question here from Marguerite, and then we can take a couple of other questions before we let Tiffany out of here.
Okay. There's two questions. have always been answered. But there are three altogether, but one has already been answered. Where do RTA go from here to there in the future? And the second question is RTA still working on one bus pass for everybody?
Yeah, so a little bit more about.
Repeat back the question and make sure that I'm answering the question correctly.
In your mic.
To repeat the question back to you, just to make sure that I'm capturing it correctly. Where we are today as RTA versus where we're going in the future as RTA, you want to hear a little bit more about that. So where we are today is we are essentially a startup organization. We have started up all of the projects that we are required to do, and we're moving forward with those projects. In November of 2016, we're going to have a ballot initiative. We're going to ask the region to support this financially. I don't like to say if, but when we are successful with that initiative.
It's not advocacy.
There we go. That's not advocacy. That's not advocacy. When we are successful with that initiative, then we foresee all of our planning work being able to move forward within a 2 to 5 year time frame. So we can start constructing within about, I'd say, if we can bond against that funding, pretty close to immediately, and we could potentially be operational in somewhere around 2018, between 2018 and 2019, with some level of dedicated service on a particular corridor. So that's where I believe we're going. In terms of the one fare pass, we are moving towards that as quickly as we can possibly move. What we know right now about our transit agencies is that they all operate using the same technology for their fare box. So knowing that, except for the people mover, I do have to caution you, except for the people mover. You know that. I know that you know that. And so knowing that, we are trying to figure out a way to program the fare boxes so that we can at least get one card that works on all systems in the interim until we can get to the point where we make the investment. We've already done the assessment of what it would take to get to a universal fare card, which is an open fare system where you can use a debit card, where you can go online and buy your fare, where you can walk up and have an option for cash or whatever, you know? And so we've looked at that, but the cost to implement that is close to 22 or 26 million? That's right. It's high. And so we know what the cost of it is to get to a fully open fare system. So we've got some interim steps in the process that we're looking at that we can do to make it better now. So do those answer your questions, Marguerite?
It's definitely great to hear that one of the top goals in the short term is to get to one fare card that can be used on all systems across the region. I don't know about how many of you guys do it, but I've got 3 different bus cards or transit cards. So I know we've got a lot of questions. So Kelly, and then
Tom, this gentleman, and then this gentleman.
all right.
And one more gentleman, if they make the questions shorter.
Okay, short question. Are you seeing major businesses or business sectors, particularly out-of-state businesses, that are coming to you for data for your analysis to work it into their development plans? Are we seeing that kind of interest yet in the work that you're doing?
I cannot personally say that I have been asked that question. However, what I can say is that for conferences and expos that are huge that want to come to Kobo, they do contact us and they are very interested in when we'll be operational in terms of bringing additional convention business to the area. So we work a lot with the Detroit Metro Visitors and Convention Bureau as well. So I know that there is some buzz in the nation concerning what Metro Detroit is doing right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to just state your first and last name and the question without the speech of Diane.
Thank you.
You can hold it with me. No. So that's my rule. So either you do it or not. Okay. Okay. So, okay. The reason I I do this is many times people take the mic and then don't allow other people to have questions answered.
Here's what I'll do. Here's what I'll do. He can tell me the question, I'll repeat it back to him.
Okay, you could do that?
Yes.
That's a great solution.
I want to know, and I'll talk loud enough.
Okay, but Marguerite can't hear.
Some of us
Okay.
have
All
hearing.
right, I want to know, if before we go to the ballot next November, something like they did before the Ann Arbor people went to the ballot, that we are gonna know how bus services are gonna be expanded, if there's new routes being created, you know, how much additional service we're gonna have. I think the voters need to know this before they go to the ballot, what they're getting, decide for their money.
So the question was, before we get to November 2016, what is the service plan going to look like? How are the voters going to know exactly what they're getting? How are they going to know what additional routes are being proposed and what the service frequency is going to look like? Essentially, what is the transit service plan going to be? And one of the things that our CEO reminds us of on a fairly regular basis, I'd say, right, Travis, is that this plan has to get down to the gnat's eyebrow. It has to be very clear about what it is we're proposing to do. Now, how we couch that and what the wording is on the ballot itself, we got to squish it. But in terms of the plan and what we make accessible to the public, it's a full-on transit service plan with schedules, with understanding where service is going to be enhanced, with understanding where communities will get more benefit, understanding what the rapid transit component is going to look like, and so on. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right.
I think this gentleman's next, this gentleman, and
I think Susan may have had one.
and then, ooh, well,
All right, well,
let's
let's
take
do
another.
5. 1, 2, 3.
No, I'll pass.
Susan and Tiffany?
Basically asked the question.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. You waited very patiently. Thank you very much. And sorry for my back.
Dennis Black. Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Dennis Black. What are the most significant political barriers to regional transportation development from both the public and private sector? Additionally, how does legislation from the city and state affect these barriers?
Okay, so first question. Barriers from a political standpoint.
From both the private and public.
Okay, from the private sector, I don't believe there are any barriers, to be perfectly honest. We've always had this myth out there that the automotives are anti-transit. I can tell you from firsthand experience that that's not the case. One of the issues that they, not now, but then, there were some issues, but currently that is not the case. One of the issues that they face and they talk to us about is that they have problems attracting their engineers to get here because engineers don't want to live in a place where they have to rely on a car. I've married an engineer. They're very black and white about this, and it's true. So in terms of a private sector barrier, that was the only hurdle I think we truly have. Businesses understand and know that when you bring transit to public transit into the area, that you attract more traffic and additional volume, so they want that. One of the things that we recognize even with State Fair and the development that's happening there is that transit, when they had their first advisory committee meeting, that was the bulk of their public comment. It was that people wanted to ensure that transit was integrated appropriately into that development. So with regard to private sector, I don't think we have an issue. In the political sector, we have the big four that we have to deal with in this particular region. I think that they have to understand what's in it for their community. And I wouldn't call that a barrier. I don't think that there are yes, big four. So you've got Wayne, county, okay, so you got the county executives in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb. And you've got the city of Detroit, the mayor, Mayor Duggan. Washtenaw County is very pro-transit, I'd like to say, so I don't even count them in this, so I don't want to be offended, Larry, but that you understand why I talk about the big four. So we have to make the argument clear what's in it for them. And one of the things that the RTA legislation has done is made that argument really easy to prove. We're required to put back 85% of whatever investment a county puts into the RTA. So 85% of whatever the collection is of taxes goes back into that community. So there's one. And two, we have to understand what they want and what they don't want in their communities. And so that's the political dance that we play. I don't like to call it a barrier. I think it's just they're not a no, but they have to be convinced that this is something that's going to benefit their community. So does that answer? Did you have another part to that question?
Maybe afterwards, but that was good.
You're good?
I will also use because I am not an RTA staff member, there are additional things that I can say that Tiffany can't, or may completely disagree with me. However, before we can, please forgive or hope you don't mind, I have a little assistant here. This is Natalia, my 2-year-old daughter. Her dad's got to head off to band practice, so she's joining us, which is why I handed. If she's doing well, that's okay. If I may need, otherwise Ruth will help. Anyway, so what I was going to add was that the RTA Board of Directors, there are 9 voting members, 2 from each county, 1 from the city of Detroit. They have to agree on what to put on the ballot. It's not even just a majority. There's a special supermajority. 1 board member from every one of those every one of those jurisdictions has to agree on the tax measure. So if both Washtenaw County members, for example, said, no, we're not putting it on the ballot, it doesn't go on the ballot for the entire region. So it is critically important that Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County, Washtenaw County, and Detroit leadership all agree with what's going on the ballot, or it doesn't go on the ballot. So it is very important that we have that support from those political decision makers. So I don't think that'll be, I think that's doable. But if, for example, there wasn't that, if Washtenaw County folks may dig in their heels and say, there better the heck be a commuter train between Detroit and Ann Arbor if you want our vote. They've got some leverage to make that happen. So that's the one step. The county commissions, the state, no one else has to give approval to put it on the ballot. But the board members do have to give approval. So those are the 2 steps. So, all right, moving on to...
and then you'll be our last, okay? Name, please?
Renard Wachowski. And my question is, how do Detroit residents get involved in the regional master transit process, and how interactive is that process? And then my second question is, what is the process on harmonized schedules between SMART and DDOT? What's the progress, if there's any progress on it? Thank you.
In terms of getting involved, one of the things that we have done, and we did a major kickoff in the month of May with regard to the Regional Master Transit Plan. We were in every county for a full day from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Doing outreach and allowing people to come and learn about what it is we were doing with regard to the master plan and the specific corridor projects. Now we're pulling back a bit to do the actual technical analysis that feeds what it is that synthesizes everything we've heard from you, looks at the technical components of the process, and then we're working on what's called a state of the system report and a market analysis, and we're also looking at how those feed into multiple scenarios. So the next time we come back to you will be sometime in the fall. I think September, October, I'm looking at Travis for it now. September, October is our timeline, and we'll be back to the public to say, here's what we've heard, here's the data that supports what we're proposing in terms of scenarios, and what do you think about this? In the meantime, if you want to participate with us, we do have monthly board meetings, and we do talk about the progress that we're making on our projects, and we do allow for open public comment period in each one of those meetings. So please come, let your voice be heard, tell us all about it. You had a 2-part question. Now, I was good at this, but I'm losing my steam here, so tell me what the second part was.
It was just like how interactive it was for that same.
Citizens Advisory.
I will say,
That's right.
I was going to say, there are comment cards. RTA has their own comment cards that you can fill out and share your point. Rube will talk a little bit more about this, but if we didn't catch you on the way in, TRU's asking everyone to share why transit matters, and on the back, to share where do you want transit to take you, how should transit be improved, how can the improved transit improve your life and community. We're going to give all of this information directly to the RTA to incorporate into their planning process. Please, please, please share your ideas, input, feedback, especially if you think it's beyond the things that Tiffany already mentioned as common things, or if you have specific ideas. And then They also have a neat online tool called My Sidewalk. If you go to RTA Michigan website, you can find the link to this My Sidewalk, where they posted a set of questions, and after a very brief login, you can share your comments, you can comment on other people's, you can do a Facebook-like thumbs up, thumbs down on, to get some real dialogue going and make it a more interactive discussion about what we need to see. All right, last question.
Okay.
Charlotte Blackwell, how are you all this evening? Well, that's good, that's good. Just had a quick question. You mentioned that there will be feeder routes, and I was just wondering, what are some of the main arteries that will be connected to, as far as the feeder route, what would some of those arteries be? The reason why I asked is because I'm by Grand River, and I know that that's one of the major thoroughfares, but that wasn't mentioned at all, so I was just wondering, what are some of the...
Absolutely. I'm always cautious in talking about a specific corridor as we're going through the master planning process. However, we have received a sufficient amount of feedback with regard to Grand River and additional east-west routes. Grand River is one that continues to come up, and so that's something that we definitely have to give some attention to. But as we go through this process, that's the type of input that we want to hear from you guys, is what corridors do you think are important for that next level of transit service?
Could you join me in thanking Tiffany? I have learned so much from excellent presentation, excellent questions, excellent responses. But keep in mind, this is just the beginning. This is an ongoing dialogue. It is not the Regional Transit Authority's plan. It is not the Regional Transit Authority's system. It is ours, all of ours. Whether we ride it or not, it is ours. And we must take some responsibility to make sure it's a best system, which stands for
Building Equitable, Sustainable Transit.
Woo! Woo! You win the prize. So thank you, Tiffany.